Hey everybody, good morning. Welcome to the Morning Devo with Beau. Hope you guys are doing good. It is August 20th and we're going to be in Acts 27 today as we are almost done with this book. And that means we will go on to the next book. This is my second time through the entire Bible on the YouTube channel. So I love to do my devotions literally just through the Bible, just reading through the text. Most people that have questions about the Bible, just like I did growing up, very secular, very progressive, very atheistic, SoCal kid, we just don't read the Bible. We've never had the Bible around. So, the questions that we have, if you will, some of the animosity we have against Christianity, a lot of it has to do, if you will, it's in a lot of ignorance where we just have never read the Bible. We're not raised with it. So, you might have been like that too, or you might know people that kind of criticize the Bible, but they've never actually read through it. And so I've always loved to just do my devotions through the Bible. It's how I came to know Jesus, and the God of the Bible was simply by picking it up, reading through it, Genesis to Revelation. And I know a lot of people are used to these little short devotions where it's just like a little tidbit here. But a lot of times you want to get an understanding, you want to grow in your knowledge of the Bible. And there's no greater way to do that than simply familiarize yourself with it. So that's why I do my morning devotions and why I have streamed them now for so long. Is COVID hit and I just wanted to do my devotions online, get them out there, and it's been a real joy. So Acts 27 today, you could always check out the archives at my YouTube channel, just Beau. So it's just right there, that French Canadian name. If you go to YouTube and you put that in, a lot of vowels there, then you'll get to it and you'll see the playlist. And there's a lot there. I mean, it's like over 1,000 videos. Unbelievable. It's been really cool. Also, you could always check out beauwillette.com, and that's just my catch-all because I have just a lot of podcasting that I've done, and I still do, and on various subjects, and my guitar stuff, and just kind of books that I've kind of written and things like that. So, yeah. Anyway, it's a catch-all site. So let's get into it. This is, Acts 27. It says, when the time came, we set sail for Italy. Paul and several other prisoners were placed in the custody of a Roman officer named Julius, a captain of the imperial regiment. Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, was also with us. We left on a ship whose home port was Adramyttium of the northwest coast of the province of Asia. It was scheduled to make several stops at ports along the coast of the province. So you get the idea that Luke, the writer of the book of Acts, was with Paul and this guy Aristarchus of Macedonian from Thessalonica. And it kind of talks about a little bit of, where they're going. And it says, the next day we docked at Sidon, and Julius was very kind to Paul and let him go ashore to visit with friends so they could provide for his needs. Putting out to sea from there, we incurred strong headwinds that made it difficult to keep the ship on course, so we sailed north of Cyprus between the island and the mainland. Keeping to the open sea, we passed along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, landing in Myra. And it says, in the province of Lycia. There, the commanding officer found an Egyptian ship from Alexandria that was bound for Italy, and he put us on board. I think the first thing I get in my devotion this morning is just the kindness that people showed to Paul. Notice that Paul is just being faithful to the call of God in his life. And there's a lot of ups and there's a lot of downs. There's incredible trial that he's going through. If you could imagine your old peeps, man, your old crew being against you. You once kind of, in a sense, fought for that gang. You were part of that team, and now you're not. And you're wanting to talk to them and talk rationally to them and show them things and help them see, but they don't want to. They want to hold their positions of power and stay in their place, stubborn, stiff-necked. And so it's difficult for Paul. And yet there are people that are giving him great kindness. And I just love the idea that Paul docks at this place, the ship docks, and Julius lets Paul go out, and people are there to greet him and to give him things that he needs. Maybe he wants parchment. Maybe he wants to write some things down, right? This kind of stuff. But people are being kind. And, it's easy for us to be fickle. And meaning we go from liking one person and then hating that person. If there's anything we've seen in just the last 5 years on the planet, is that human beings will easily go any direction. They will be moved in droves to certain causes that they once would have never been a part of in the past. They'll go across political lines, they'll do whatever. And we just are easily moved and swayed through news and the way people seem to be going. Just look at how we bought toilet paper not too long ago. Incredible. People start freaking out and buying massive amounts of toilet paper, of all things. And so there's no more toilet paper anywhere. And it just, one person does it, another person does it, and we just go. Sometimes that's how we are with people of God. 1 minute we're for them, the next minute we're against them. We hear something about them, and we kind of go that direction. Oh, they're not a good person. They're not. We have to be careful. Today I don't want to be fickle. I don't want to be weak-minded. I don't want to move with the crowd. I want to be a person who's able to think sober-minded, to stay on track, not to be moved by all the news networks, or what I like to call the false prophets of today, those that move the people. And I just find it really cool that there's a group of people that really stuck with Paul through all of this. And believe me, I'm sure there was a lot of propaganda against him. So we had several days of slow sailing, and after great difficulty, we finally neared Sindus. But the wind was against us, so we sailed across to Crete and along the sheltered coast of the island, past the Cape of Salome. We struggled along the coast with great difficulty and finally arrived at fair havens near the town of Lasea. We had lost a lot of time. The weather was becoming dangerous for sea travel because it was late in the fall, and Paul spoke to the ship's officers about it. So you think it's late in the fall. Now, just so you know, I lived on the island of Kauai for a time in, of course, the Hawaiian Islands. And there is a hurricane season. And as most of you probably are aware, when something gets to late fall, getting into winter time, we know that the hurricane season starts, it bumps up, especially in September, right in that neck of the woods, man, it gets a little crazy, and it starts getting cold, and, winter swells start happening. And, when you think winter swells, by the way, in California, you think of what? Big waves. You think of Mavericks up north, in California, bigger surf, cold swells, coming in maybe from the Alaska area, coming down the coast, but big north swells. And so when I see that late fall, I kind of like, you get kind of excited as an ex-surfer, kind of going like, woo, that's exciting. We get some big swells, but they're cold swells and they're rough swells. I love what Michael says, keep me in the fairway, meaning on the golf course, Oh, that's great. And Mike Coyle too, you're probably interested in that golf too. So it says, men, he said, I believe there is trouble ahead if we go on, shipwreck, loss of cargo, and danger to our lives as well. But the officer in charge of the prisoners listened more to the ship's captain and the owner than to Paul. And since Fair Havens was an exposed harbor, a poor place to spend the winter, most of the crew wanted to go on to Phoenix, farther up the coast of Crete, and spend the winter there. Phoenix was a good harbor with only a southwest and northwest exposure. So obviously, Paul had some, thoughts. No one wants to listen to him because, man, it's a Jewish rabbi guy. It's like, who's going to listen to him? But he speaks up and he says, hey, this is what I think's going to happen, man. There's some danger. And people want to actually dock in a particular place called Phoenix because it's just not going to be so exposed to those harsh late fall, early winter swells that can really, drown a ship. And it says, when a light wind began flowing from the south, the sailors thought they could make it. So they pulled up anchor and sailed close to the shore of Crete. But the weather changed abruptly, and a wind of typhoon strength, called a northeaster, burst across the island and blew us out to sea. The sailors couldn't turn the ship into the wind, so they gave up and let it run before the gale. I love the descriptions here, by the way. I mean, there's such detail here from Dr. Luke as far as, sailing is concerned. Now, I've sailed before in the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf of America, whatever floats your boat there. But, I've done that. I can't imagine what it would be like to be in rough seas, and having to deal with turning, a ship on, in the ocean and not able to do that. So you got to literally just run with it. But I do really know what it's like to be in a rip current when you're surfing. And, and sometimes when you're going to go out to surf, you have to actually find the rip currents and go with it. You just jump into the rip current, and let it take you out to sea. And you go, why would you do that, Beau? Because you're wanting to get out to surf. And instead of fighting the currents, sometimes you can find a rip that's taking you out. It's ripping people out. Now, for someone who's just on the beach hanging out, that's a scary thing. But for people that have surfed for a while, they know that current could be a blessing to them where they don't even have to paddle. They literally just get into the current, and it'll take them right out there, and it'll plop them out way out there so they can just kind of then turn and go and surf. So it's kind of cool. But I find this this description just so cool, so detailed. It says, we sailed along the sheltered side of a small island named Cauda, where with great difficulty we hoisted abroad the lifeboat being towed behind us. Then the sailors bound ropes around the hull of the ship to strengthen it, and they were afraid of being driven across the sandbars of Citrus off the African coast. So they lowered the sea anchor to slow the ship and were driven before the wind. The next day, as gale-force winds continued to batter the ship, the crew began throwing the cargo overboard. The following day, they even took some of the ship's gear and threw it overboard. The terrible storm raged for many days, blotting out the sun and the stars until at last all hope was gone. So sad. All hope is gone. Sometimes people's lives are like this, where they are stuck in darkness and gloom, right? Everything of any light is blotted out of their mind, and all they see is the end. They have no hope, and that's a rough place to be at, where all you see is fog. And it's scary when you're in, life and you're in a car and all you see is fog and you don't see what's up ahead. You don't know what's going to happen. And that's when fear and anxiety grip us as human beings so much, where we don't know the future. Now, one thing we know about what the Bible teaches when we walk through the Bible is that God has a purpose and plan for his people. And he will see them home. He will take care of them. And Jesus said things that were so awesome in this way, right? Lo, I am with you always to the end of the earth. Man, don't worry about things. Don't worry about your life. You believe in God, believe also in me. I mean, talk about a statement. You believe in God, believe also in me. I mean, isn't that equating you with God? You want me to believe in you as I believe in God? And Jesus goes, yes. Now you're getting it. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. Don't let your heart be troubled, right? That's the whole idea. Jesus gives us light. In his light, we see light. That's the Psalms talk about that. What is it? Psalm 36:9. But it's so true. In him, he is light. We see light. We see clearly. We're able to see what's ahead, so that we are with hope. We are not without hope. So we have a living hope, and that's something amazing that I see. Kind of a little thing I pull out of this. Here they're dealing with physical fog, but Jesus really clears us of spiritual fog to where he gives us a sure foundation. I'm reading through the Quran right now, as you guys know, and I'm putting that on my channel as well. But there's not much hope. There's not a living hope, man. The only hope you got really is jihad, really the purification through war, and man, that's just not a real living hope. There's just not a sure foundation there. And boy, the Bible is so much different. And the Messiah, Jesus, is so much different. You might be lacking hope today. Look at Jesus. Get your eyes focused in the right way, in the right place. That's why we go through the Bible. And it says, they threw everything overboard, right? All hope was gone, and no one had eaten for a long time. Finally, Paul called the crew together and said, men, you should have listened to me in the first place and not left Crete. Hey, man, sometimes you do have to talk this way to people. Hey, you should have listened. Right? You didn't listen to me, man. And it says, you would have avoided all this damage and loss, but take courage. Notice the great affirmation here too. He doesn't just say you should have listened to me. He says, hey, but be courageous. Take courage. He says, none of you will lose your lives, even though the ship will go down. For last night, an angel of God to whom I belong and whom I serve stood beside me. And he said, don't be afraid, Paul, for you will surely stand before trial before Caesar. Now, what's really interesting about this messenger is this sounds very much like another event on the Sea of Galilee, where a storm is taking place and the disciples are freaking out, and Jesus is woken up, and Jesus says, don't be afraid, man. Don't be afraid, and he takes care of the matter, for the apostles. But fear has gripped everybody. But notice, because this special messenger, I got to think this might be Jesus, hanging out with Paul, assuring him that you're going to be okay, man. I got you going to Caesar. I told you you would. I told you you'd share the gospel before kings, and I'm going to get you there. But notice that Paul he's right. He's doing okay. Why? Because he knows Jesus is with him. Boy, man, that faith, that's awesome, to trust the Lord like that. And notice those same words, don't be afraid, right? What's more, God in his goodness has granted safety to everyone sailing with you. So take courage, for I believe God. It will be just as he said, but we will be shipwrecked on the island. So Paul says, hey, I believe God. I believe what God says. And God says we'll get there. So we're going to get shipwrecked, but we're going to make it. So be courageous. I love it. Don't just say, hey, you're wrong to people. Hey, you guys made the wrong decision. But give them some hope, some opportunity to move beyond, right? Don't just say, I told you. Don't just dig in like that. But if you're going to say, I told you, then say, hey, but there's another opportunity. There's another opportunity to get it right. We're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. God's got us. And to think about it, if God's really has you and God really has me, think of what we're saying. The creator of all things has us. He's in control of us. He knows us. He's going to bring us home safely to him. We have an all-powerful being that's on our side, so we don't have to worry. He can conquer death. He can resurrect. By faith we overcome. So it says, about midnight on the 14th night of the storm, we were being driven across the Sea of Adria. The sailors sensed land was near. They dropped a weighted line and found that the water was 120 feet deep. But a little later, they measured again and found it was only 90 feet deep. At this rate, they were afraid we soon would be driven against the rocks along the shore. Oh man, another problem. And they threw out 4 anchors from the back of the ship and prayed for daylight. Then the sailors tried to abandon the ship. They lowered the lifeboat as though they were going to put out anchors from the front of the ship. But Paul said to the commanding officer and the soldiers, "You will all die unless the sailors stay aboard." So the soldiers cut the ropes to the lifeboat and let it drift away. Man, think of the tension in this moment. Do I trust the Jewish guy, or do I trust the commander of the ship? These are some big choices, right? And they end up going, I'm going to go with this dude who's like close to God. And at this point, I get an idea, or I get something that I've witnessed in my life. No matter what people believe, doesn't matter if you're progressive, doesn't matter if you're atheist, agnostic, Buddhist, doesn't matter. But when it comes down to panic time, an earthquake, a hurricane, whatever it is, but when it comes down to a fire, whatever it is, people want to be around people that are stable and sober-minded and have a foundation in God. People want to be around people that not just know God, but have a stability about them. They're not in panic mode. They're in the know. They have an inner confidence. And man, that's what really moved them to make decisions. Do people make decisions maybe potentially to go towards Jesus because they see an inner stability and peace within my life? Or do they see me as some frantic Christian? Just, I'm a Christian, but I'm in panic mode all the time, just freaking out. No one's going to want to listen to you. No one's going to want to be like you, right? No one's going to want to read the Bible because they see a frantic, freaked out person. And there's plenty of them. Just go to Venice Beach and hang out a little bit. There's plenty of people that are kind of wacky. But do you have peace? Do you know the Prince of Peace? Have you taken Jesus' yoke upon you that is easy and light and found rest for your souls? Have you entered into that rest that it speaks of in Hebrews chapter 4? That rest of God. Paul, because of his relationship with Jesus, he had a certain quality about him that moved even the most secular people the most pagan of people, when it came down to it, when the chips were down, to make decisions, listening to Paul. Pretty radical. Even over their other people's expertise. Just as the day was drawing, Paul urged everyone to eat. You have been so worried that you haven't touched food for 2 weeks, he said. Please eat something now for your own good, for not a hair of your head will perish. Wow, what confidence. Then he took some bread, gave thanks before God, before all of them. So he praised with them all and broke off a piece of it and ate it. Then everyone was encouraged and began to eat. They were encouraged. They saw the confidence, the peace of Jesus in this man. And they all began to eat. All 276 of us who were on board. Wow. Talk about a giant prayer fellowship meeting, gathering, time. 276. Just think if you had a men's ministry of 276 people at a men's breakfast. I mean, that's what this is. It's a men's breakfast on board with not much, but a big God and a lot of prayer and everybody riveted. And it says, after eating, the crew lightened the ship further by throwing the cargo of wheat overboard. Now we're getting to the end, right? Don't got much left. The wheat's gone. Before morning dawned, they didn't recognize the coastline, but they saw a bay with a beach and wondered if they could get to shore by running the ship aground. So they cut off the anchors and left them in the sea. Then they lowered the rudders, raised the foresail, and headed towards the shore. But they hit a shoal and ran the ship aground too soon. The bow of the ship struck fast, while the stern was repeatedly smashed by the force of the waves and began to break apart. The soldiers wanted to kill the prisoners to make sure they didn't swim ashore and escape, but the commanding officer wanted to spare Paul, so he didn't let them carry out their plan. Then he ordered all who could swim to jump overboard first and make for land. The others held onto planks and debris from the broken ship, so everyone escaped safely to shore. I get a couple things from this latter part of Acts 27. One of them is, if I don't have my anchor in the ground, I'm going to sail everywhere. You got to have your anchor deep, right? Deep in the soil of God's word. If my anchor isn't deep in, then I am going to flail around and the waves will beat against me and just tear me apart. So there has to be an anchoring, in my life. Where is your life anchored? Where have you put down roots? What is it that you are trusting? Who is it that you are trusting? What are you believing? Great questions to ask. As a secular atheist kid, growing up as a teenager like that, you're not knowing what you're believing. You're believing all kinds of things, just everything kind of floating all about, and you're just getting pounded by, repetitive waves. Because you don't really have your anchor into anything, unfortunately. And I also find something interesting. There's a favor that Paul has. Even his enemies become his friends. I'm pretty sure that's a proverb in there. That even those that were once your enemies now have become your friend. Hey, it's kind of standard procedure to not let the prisoners go. In case of an emergency, you got to kill those prisoners so that they don't go free. But Paul is not treated in such a way. He's been given favor with even the enemies. And it just shows that, Jesus is going to get Paul to where he needs to go. And he's going to get you and I where we need to go. Will we go through the trials and our boat experience? Yeah, we're going to go through some times, but will we trust Jesus in those times of suffering in the times of difficulty, in the times of trial. If I'm anchored down, yes. But if I'm not anchored down, and I can just encourage you, get into fellowship. Find a church where you're not complaining about the church. Not that. I don't want you to have that attitude. Where you stop your complaining and you go and you listen and you sit and you learn to say hi to people and you learn to pray with people and you learn to give and not just receive. But you really start learning how to become part of a church family where you can have an anchor of fellowship with others. Of course, surrounding Jesus. So, very cool chapter, great devotion. Man, and there's some great points. I love what you guys are saying in the comment corner too. Very cool, very good. And so, you guys have a great rest of the day. And thanks for joining me on the morning devotion. Acts 28 tomorrow. Woo! Wow. Talk about getting close to being done with the book, right? Take care. Bye-bye.